There's never been a better time to get into game development. Even as the industry is hemorrhaging designers, coders, and artists because of heavy layoffs, and even as hardware costs are shooting through the roof, if you've ever dreamed about making a fun little game, even if just for your own entertainment, this is the time to do it. Why? Because it's never been easier to get your hands on software specifically designed to make game development faster and more efficient. There's an enormous amount of game development knowledge freely available to anyone willing to look for it. And until very recently, it's never been easier to acquire the hardware needed to create something and distribute it to millions upon millions of people. What about the competition, I hear you say? What about the thousands of games released on Steam every single year? What about AI slop? Well, what about it? Just because there are a lot of people making games today, is that really a reason not to do it yourself? Sure, these are challenges you might have to consider, but what are you saying really? Playing around and testing ideas isn't worth it unless you're doing it professionally? I'm working on a project and I don't know what I'll do with it once I'm done. I mean, yeah, it'd be very nice to be able to sell a game and make money out of it, but that's certainly not the motivation right now. Right now, my project is a creative outlet, and it's a way for me to see how far I can actually go with the Godot engine. What can I say? I just like making games, and I've always wanted to make one on my own. So if you're asking yourself the question I see popping up online constantly, which is there any sense in getting into game development in 2026? I think you're asking yourself the wrong question. The real question is, why do you want to make games? Are you just interested in the concept of creating worlds and systems? Maybe there's a very specific kind of game you'd like to see in the world, but since no one else is making it, it's up to you to make it. Well, here's another question. If you know already what kind of game you want to make, what would you be willing to do to make it happen? And finally, how long can you go without imagining systems or game creation in one way or another? Answer that honestly, and the should I question dissolves on its own. Now let's get back to these there's tens of thousands of games being released every year, and what about AI slop questions? I get it. We all have dreams. I'm sure most folks would love to make the next Stardew Valley, Subnautica, or Silksong game without having to worry about competing with thousands of other releases happening that same year trying to compete for the same attention as your game. I'm assuming you're going to aim for a higher pedigree when it comes to your games. You don't want to be known for asset flips or AI slop. If that's the standard you're going to set for yourself, I would suggest going back to the real question. Why do you want to make games? If it's because you love game design and you really just want to make games, these external factors aren't the prime motivators. It's your desire to create, build, and share experiences with others. That motivation is part of the equation that incentivizes people like you to create Silksongs and Stardew Valley-like experiences. And you know, these are games with intricate systems, a distinct visual style, original music, and gameplay loops that hook you for hours. Trust me when I tell you, you're not going to be prompting these things into existence. But what's really cool is that the modern toolsets that are available, even for free, are more than capable of creating these kinds of experiences if you have the patience to do so. But before you get ahead of yourself, understand the sheer effort that went into creating those experiences. There's no skipping the creative process and fast forwarding to success. And you know what? I feel like this is where most people kind of trip up. The general consensus is that making games is hard, that making commercial games is even harder, and I think that's by and large very true. But I'd argue it's true mostly because most of us default to wanting to make the hard thing. After experiencing something like Stardew Valley, we want to make something like that instead of a 5-minute puzzle game. We finish Silksong and we're inspired by its design. Thus, we start creating something similar instead of simple platformers we could finish in a month. You know, I would really like to believe that you can make the simplest game without an existential journey attached to it and actually enjoy the process of making it. It just depends on what you're trying to achieve. Scope is a choice. Difficulty, to a large extent, is a choice. Which brings us to the real subject of this video. The one thing that in the end makes it possible for even single developers to craft the gameplay experiences that carry the potential to touch millions of players just like you and I. Perseverance is probably the single greatest quality you can have when it comes to completing long and arduous tasks. It's the will, strength, and sheer grit to see a project through after the initial excitement has worn off, the problems have piled up, and finishing the damn thing has become much harder than you originally imagined. This is how it usually turns out with game projects. And having said that, here's an honest-to-God real story to illustrate my point. I used to be part of a business incubator called Game Lab. It was a really interesting program where people were grouped together as designers, artists, sound engineers, programmers, and producers. These groups would then go on to create a demo of a game project that would randomly be assigned to them. At the end of the program's first phase, the teams or groups would each vote for the most promising demo. Obviously, they couldn't vote for their own game project. There would have been significant bias issues. In the end, 3 games would be selected for continued development. The people whose projects were cancelled were then absorbed into the remaining teams. The idea was to polish those games to a point where the teams could search for funding and turn their projects into commercial products. The incubator was part of a local university of applied sciences, but even unemployed people could join if they had the skills and got past the interview process. This practically meant that you could make games while the government paid for your upkeep, which is pretty sick. An awesome opportunity for anyone wanting to make games while being able to pay the bills too. I remember everyone accepted into the program being really excited about the opportunity and the teams they got to be part of. The first phase started early in the spring and continued all the way until summer. The first few months went by fast and people were super focused on making their games. But as we got further into spring and the sun started making an appearance on the northern skies again, it seemed like the initial excitement wasn't there anymore. In fact, at the offices, a lot of the participants were now talking about games, game development, and playing the latest popular releases instead of working on their own games. While some people carried on building their projects, others became more concerned with social gatherings, parties, and life in general. Finally, summer came. Most projects failed, and as the first phase came to a close, only a few projects went on to continue development in the fall. It was interesting to see the people who stayed. Compared to the original group, it wasn't all that many people, and even in those remaining projects, there were many who didn't really want to continue. They stayed because they felt obligated to doing so. So watching the energy drain out of the people after the initial excitement was interesting and quite telling. Now here's the thing. When you start something new, like a new project, the sky's the limit. Everything's exciting and possible. But when the everyday grind starts, the cost of those decisions becomes a burden to carry, a problem to solve. Another aspect that stuck with me was how much losing momentum in a project affected everyone involved. More than once, I saw this loss of momentum as a direct result of overly complex designs for a feature that should have been resolved with a quick and effective solution. The longer people stayed stuck on a trivial problem, the harder it got. Clearly sapped enthusiasm and made people apathetic. So here's the moral of my story. When games die, it's not because of AI slop or relentless competition on Steam. It's not the failing AAA industry with their insane burn rates and impossible corporate structures. Fact of the matter is that you're the problem. Your thoughts, your shifting priorities, doubt, fear, not trusting the process. You in the end walking away from the project before you even really started. When you're an indie developer, you hold all the power in the project. You make all the decisions, and you also carry all the responsibility to get the work done. If the work isn't getting done, the game isn't moving forward. This is always a problem, and eventually it will affect the way that you look at yourself and the project at large. You need to keep moving to stay alive. The simple secret to success in almost anything you do is this: never stop doing the things that you need to be doing. This is the point where people lose their shit and start calling me Captain Obvious. And yet, businesses fail, game projects fade into obscurity, and the biggest losers gain back the mountain of fat they shed tears, blood, and dignity to get rid of. By and large, the steps towards success aren't esoteric secrets. And I'd argue most people know what they need to do to be successful. It's just that even if it's not hard to figure out what needs doing, it's the doing part, and doing it consistently that's hard. This is fundamental issues with regards to ourselves. Consider your health. How does one stay healthy? Dude, we all know the answer. Stop eating shit, stop eating too much of it, period. Get off your ass and give me 100 push-ups. Now do that every single day of the year and tell me you're not fresh and fit. I dare you. Don't tell me it's not that simple when it is. I know this. I'm overweight. I wish I wasn't, but I am. I could change that tomorrow, but for some godforsaken reason, I haven't found the self-discipline to not eat after 7. I love cheese. I don't move enough. God damn it. But I will get to it, folks. And when I do, I'll make a video about it. Alright, then there's this. The world isn't fair. Fact is that you can jump into developing a wonderful game, commit to the project completely, and in the end, as you crawl over the finish line with the remains of your will and strength, guess what? Still doesn't guarantee anything. Perseverance doesn't guarantee people want to play your game. You can't force people to acknowledge you and your work. You could still fail. Man, what do you mean, what's the point? You knew what the point was even before we started this video. If you love games and think about making them every day, none of this stuff really matters. You can take a long, cold look at the facts and realize that even with all this said, you're still going to give it a shot. Because if you can live with whatever comes from the effort you pour into this creative outlet, at least you won't have to live with the stress of having to do the right thing the exact right way. Instead, you're having fun, you're experimenting, playing with ideas. You're discovering an adventure and framing it for others to enjoy and experience. You just keep working on your ideas, man, and discovering more ways of having fun. Making games doesn't mean you have to quit your day job, nor should you. Don't make any drastic, reckless, life-changing decisions until you know what needs to be done and you know you have what it takes to stick it out. Just make a game. Make a tiny, silly 5-minute puzzle game, Learn to finish something, then do it again and again and again. Ladies and gentlemen, if you keep at it, one day, I promise you will create something that could possibly offer opportunities for building a career out of your hobby. If that's what you still want to do. I imagine most of us will recognize that moment. If then you have built the skills necessary to do what needs to be done, the only thing left is for you to build a game. In the end, whatever prize you extract from that opportunity, it will be earned by that boring, sometimes difficult work you do day in and day out, long after the novelty has worn off. With perseverance, ladies and gentlemen. So ask yourself again, why do you want to make games, man? If the answer is because you simply can't imagine doing anything else, then stop overthinking it. Open up your editor and go chase that opportunity down. Thanks for watching. My name's been Chris. This is Tech Dad Impact. Now go make something awesome, and I'll see you in the next video.